Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Tony, it's Friday. Everything is wonderful in the world. I think it's supposed to rain all weekend, but that's okay because the weekend's almost here. Tony, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you for asking, Tom. It's the first time you've ever asked after all the times I'm always asking. And I ask wanting to know how you're doing. It's not just something I always say. It's like I'm genuinely interested in knowing how you're doing. But I'm doing well. Thank you for asking. I'm looking forward to a busy weekend of trying to avoid the rain and staying inside and looking out the window very sadly.
I like the idea that you start the show that way because you're genuinely interested in me and not because then it just lets you do it like a robot and then puts the onus on me to say something interesting, which sometimes I do and sometimes it's today's show. But so, either way.
It's just going to be coming volleying back and forth. No. How are you doing?
Please, sir, I insist. Your mood.
I can only, you know what'll happen. I'll just start putting in Chat GPT, please give me an intro for the next show. This is what we're going to talk about. And co-host name is Tom. And boom, I could just do that from now on. And, that's the way it's going to go eventually, Tom, just so you know.
ChatGPT is going to recognize that it's this show, and it's going to spit back exactly what you say every time. Because of the words artificial intelligence, there's a lot more artificial there than...
More A than I?
Yes. We're just going to say yes and move on.
So we're here to talk about some Ohio State stuff. First thing I want to discuss is just throwing out some the top risers from spring ball. Tom and I each have 3 that we have painstakingly discussed before the show and show prep, but we do about 3 days worth of show prep. That's why our last show was like Tuesday or Wednesday and the show is Friday. It takes a long time to put this stuff together. And however you want to define risers, Tom, it could be somebody who climbs actual risers. It could be, or somebody who plays well from the spring practice one and exceeds expectations, perhaps. However you want to define it, I will let you go first.
Yeah, I kind of viewed this as where did I think this person was maybe entering the spring or coming out of last season versus where do I sort of perceive them to be right now? And I think probably for you, for me, for most people out there, when you think about that, you probably are thinking Carnell Tate. And Carnell Tate, yes, there was, they were missing a couple starting wide receivers this spring, but very early in the spring, after practice 5 or 6, he loses his black stripe. He's a starter in the spring game. He's someone who you knew the talent was there. This is not a surprise that Carnell Tate is a good football player. This is not a surprise that Carnell Tate is potentially going to be, an early in his career type of impact player. It is, I think, a little bit of a surprise that it has happened this quickly. Just not that it was out of the realm of possibility that it was going to happen this quickly, but you never assume that's going to happen for someone. So when it does, that sort of changes what the ceiling is there, I think.
Yeah, I'm writing my receiver spring recap piece right now, and I'm talking about Carnell Tate, obviously, and saying, well, yes, he started the spring game, so give him credit for that. And sure, like you said, Julian Fleming and Emeka Ibuka are out, so there's some hits there, and Xavier Johnson. However, there were 6 other freshman eligible players that could have started, and it was him. So that's where he has elevated himself and moved above his classmates and the class ahead of him at this point. So, yeah, I think anytime you start moving past people, that's something to take note of. And I'm wondering if my first guy that I'm going to mention has done that, and that's Kenyatta Jackson, redshirt freshman defensive end who all spring, just the offseason, we talked about the defensive ends. It's going to be Jack Sawyer, it's going to be JT Tuimoloau, and we both expect Caden Curry to be that number 3 in there, and then you hope a 4th can emerge. And this spring, I saw as much, if not more, out of Kenyatta Jackson than I did Caden Curry, and that's not a slight to Caden Curry. That's more about Kenyatta Jackson rising, if you will, rather than Caden Curry falling. Now, we will do our top 24 fallers for next week's show, Spring Fallers. But this is more about Kenyatta Jackson flashing it. You know, every time we see him, he was getting to the quarterback, credited with 1 sack in the spring game. Probably should have been 2, and I'm not just saying that because of the bold predictions, which I already won. Would I like to have won by more? No, I want Tom to be as close as possible to winning and then end up losing. So I'm totally fine with 1 sack. Did I mention to the scorekeepers to maybe just keep it to 1 while I was winning comfortably? Yes, of course I did. But he put on weight. He's gotten stronger. He's not just a speedy pass rusher who can't, when do you play him? And it's like, well, he's not strong enough to defend the run, so you really have to pick and choose. I think he showed this spring that the opportunities to pick and choose him will be greater than certainly they were last year.
Absolutely. He's someone who I think you came into spring thinking, okay, they've got Tuimoloau, they've got Sawyer, they've got Curry, and they need to find a 4th. And I think you're coming out of the spring feeling like Kenyatta Jackson is the 4th, period, full stop. And he's someone who there's still development to his game that needs to happen. And there's a little bit of development that probably needs to happen to Caden Curry. But I think you're coming out of the spring feeling better about, okay, they have a full 2 deep at the defensive end position that they can feel pretty confident in this year. I don't know if you have any interior defensive linemen on your list, but I think you came into the spring looking at the defensive ends and thinking, okay, they've got 3, they need to find a 4th, and you thought the same thing about the interior of the defensive line. And I think I'm more confident that they have found that 4th person at the end position than I am at the tackles. That, just in terms of being 100% game ready. Like, I think who that 4th person is in the interior, but I don't know that that's a super high confidence thing. So, yeah, I think Kenyatta Jackson's a good pick there. Someone else who could end up playing in a defensive end type spot this year is CJ Hicks. He's my second guy, and he really was someone who took advantage of the opportunities, much like Carnell Tate. You had no Tommy Eichenberg all spring. You had no Steel Chambers for kind of the second half of the spring or the last third of the spring. And CJ Hicks really made the most, I felt like, of that opportunity. I don't expect him to start. I know there's been, you've got to start him over Steel Chambers now, and I don't think that that's true. But it feels like he has probably at this point earned some kind of a role this fall. And it sounds like Jim Knowles is looking at him as maybe the second jack behind Mitchell Melton, which they really didn't do the jack at all this spring. So that's just kind of more of a theoretical thing at this point. But, if you do have a linebacker go down, Cody Simon probably going to be the first guy who comes in. But, I think at this point, I feel much more confident that CJ Hicks is ready to make an impact this fall, whether it's as, some kind of a rotational thing at will or at jack, whatever it is. I feel a lot more confident that you're going to see some meaningful CJ Hicks snaps this fall.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Just talking about the will linebacker position, I think it would help Steel Chambers to rotate at least a little bit, because he's a guy that always talks about wearing down over the course of the season, because he's never going to be a 245-pound linebacker. He starts out at he tries and tries and tries to get to 235, and by the time November rolls around, he's at 226 or something like that. I think it would help him to have CJ Hicks take a series or 2 or some plays here and there at that will linebacker, and not unlike the running back rotation where you're just trying to keep guys fresh. And then with the jack situation, I believe he's made for that in many ways, because it's not just a pass rushing thing on the outside. It's also an interior disruption thing, which is something he's very good at. Saw him do it several times this spring, where I wrote about it in what I think that I did yesterday. It's he's got this crossover move in on the interior where he gets past guards and centers are just what was that? And then he's either making the quarterback give the ball up on a read, or bringing him down, or bringing, it's a Sam Hubbard, let's just bring the entire block down. And I think he's got some. I think he's going to make some plays, and then as you're making plays, you're like, why are we taking him off of the field? And I think it goes back to, he's 225, 228 pounds. We can't, you need him for November, December, January as well. So I think there's enough snaps there to keep people happy, to keep him productive. And let's remind people that, Jim Knowles split this position between two guys, sort of, at Oklahoma State, and they combined for 24 and a half, 29 tackles for loss. So there's plenty of room for two guys manning that position. And is that, do they each get a third of the defensive snaps? Like there's CJ Hicks gets 1/3, Mitchell Melton gets 1/3, and then the other third there is no jack, that sort of thing. Or is it a quarter, half? I don't know how they'll work it out, but if it's productive, it might be 50-50.
Yeah, and then, I think anytime they have confidence that you can play a second guy at a spot without having a significant drop-off, they are pretty much always going to choose to do that, except at the quarterback position. That's kind of the one spot where it's sort of an exception. If you've got, I think it is going to be difficult for the 4 through 6 wide receivers to match what the 1 through 3 receivers could be this year. Maybe the 1 through 4 wide receivers, but I don't think you're seeing 6 wide receivers. You might see 4. You're going to see maybe 5. You're going to see they're probably going to play 3 tight ends. They rotate some of those guys through, at least situationally. Defensive line, they're going to do that. Offensive line is sort of an exception again, but they just, if you can do it, if you can keep guys fresh during the course of a game, but also keep guys fresh during the course of the season, I think you're going to see that. I think you're going to see that at corner this year. I think you're going to see situational subbing at safety this year. I think there's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff. That is a luxury that a lot of teams don't have, where you've got that number one level of talent and then it falls off pretty quickly because you're not as good at developing. You're just not bringing in, you hit the, I always think of Maryland in this situation. They've got the 1 5-star receiver, but then the 4th wide receiver was the, 853rd player in his class or whatever it is. Where you have the one guy and then you kind of fall off a cliff pretty quickly. Ohio State doesn't have that problem, so they have the luxury of potentially rotating guys. And I think, in the positions where you would do that, corner, wide receiver, running back, tight end, they're going to try and take advantage of that and do that.
So my next one, you mentioned situational, safety, rotation. I will go ahead and mention Sonny Styles, so that you don't have to, but you will again get to talk about him. But a guy that is a unique person and possibilities abound. But when I asked him about those possibilities this spring, he's like, I just want to get good at being, a couple of things. I just want to be a good safety. Whereas a lot of the spring was used by Jim Knowles to figure out what they can do with Sonny Styles. And Jim Knowles said that the spring isn't enough to figure out what they can do with Sonny Styles. And I think the fun thing about him is that each week it could be something different based on what the defense is. And right now, I think you can expect him to start some games as a Sam linebacker against, whatever, if you're running a 12 personnel, the Georgia, the Michigan, that sort of stuff. I would not be surprised to see Sonny Styles starting those games. I still want to see how much he actually rotates in as a deep safety, because I think there's enough stuff for him to do as that Sam, bullet, star, whatever, phraseology you want to use for a safety / linebacker hybrid, which Ohio State doesn't necessarily have, but they do with Sonny Styles because that's how they used him last year. And I think they're just going to continue to branch out from that. And a guy who can turn and run with receivers. I saw him do it with Caleb Brown step for step. And, the couple plays after that, give up a long touchdown to Caleb Brown. But he can do these things. And so I wouldn't be surprised to see him as this Sam that can also stay out there in nickel. And I would not be shocked. And it's a different defense. It's a different scheme. But if he has a Pete Werner type of impact where it's we don't need the nickel as much as we thought we did.
It's funny. You were talking and I thought, man, this just sounds a lot like Pete Werner, where Pete Werner, you don't have to be able to, you're not covering the other team's number one wide receiver 40 snaps a game. But Pete Werner, there were times when Pete Werner, as, even when he was playing linebacker, they would rotate him back and have him play, either cover someone running back out of the backfield or something way downfield, or rotate him back as like sort of a deep safety kind of position. And it feels like that's something you could see out of Sonny Styles too, where, I don't think they know exactly what they want to do with him and it's not like, well, I don't know that he can do any of these things. It's just sort of, okay, he can't do 17 things, so you kind of have to pick and choose, but he probably could do a bunch of those things, at least situationally, just to disguise coverages, present some weird, if a team has a unique matchup challenge in terms of, hey, this tight end is both uniquely big and fast or whatever, that's, just like he's the Flex Seal tape, like just bam, just throw him on whatever, slap him on whatever that weird problem is, and be the Isaiah Simmons of this defense. I think that's a real possibility for him. So yeah, I don't know that I would have him as a riser, because this is sort of where I expected him to be into the spring, but maybe I was too high on him coming into the spring, and the people who are a little slower like Tony are just catching up. I don't know. I mean, it's impossible to say.
No, you make a good point there. I also do like the nickname Flex Seal.
Yeah.
But the animal version, like a flexing seal.
Oh man, I'm glad you're not in charge of NIL. I think that's maybe the most my strongest opinion there. All right, let's get to my last one. Another guy who I don't think has a great nickname right now, Carson Hinsman. He's someone who, I remember when you were putting together your pre-spring depth chart, if you were going to put, who's the second team guard, who's the second, what order are their centers in? And it was just kind of like a big shrug emoji where it's like, yeah, it could be any of these 6 people unless it's someone else. And then just from day one of the spring, Carson Hinsman was running with the ones at center. And he never really gave that up. Vic Cutler never caught him. There was no Jacob James this spring. We'll see how that maybe changes when Jacob James comes back. But Toby Wilson was playing at guard this spring. He was not working at center anymore. So I don't think Carson Hinsman is there yet. And Ryan Day essentially said, no, he's not there yet in terms of having definitely won the job, or definitely would be ready to play today if we had a game today. But he certainly seems like he is on track right now to be the starting center this fall, and unless something changes, and maybe they find someone in the portal, maybe maybe Jacob James comes out in fall camp and wins the job, maybe Vic Cutler wins the job in fall camp, but just in terms of where he started the spring, where he was just kind of like, yeah, he is one of the other guys who's in the mix for one of these jobs, and then he spent the whole spring as the repping with the ones, that I think changes what I think he could be doing this fall.
Yeah, he was my number 2 behind Carnell Tate on offense, and it is strange, and maybe it's a product of just the concern about the tackles that we haven't talked more about the center, and like Ryan Day wasn't asked about it at all on after the spring game, because it's just the focus is on the tackles, because that's the prime premier position on the offensive line. But if you don't have a center, it doesn't matter about your tackles either. So I think what we saw was good, and every time I saw a low snap, I think it was Victor Cutler. It was never Carson Hinsman. So, and talking to him, it was talking to him that really gave me the most confidence in him this spring, because he was very measured, he's very mature, very matter of fact, and it was very Luke Whippler-like. And that's certainly a tremendous example to follow, a guy who, as a true freshman, went to work after the season to beat out incumbents, and did. And you got Carson Hinsman doing the same thing, preparing to start as a redshirt freshman. And if you can make it happen, it's a tremendous luxury to then not have to worry about this position, ideally, for like another 3 years, unless, of course, you go pro after your redshirt sophomore year and throw everything into a fire.
That doesn't seem like something that's very likely to happen. I can't think of one example of that happening. So no, I think that's he is potentially a guy who could really make a long-term impact there if he just continues to develop. And that's one of those things where it doesn't really matter that he's not ready to play today. If he was ready to play today, that would be great. But in your first year, it is very rare that a coach is going to come out of spring with a first-year starter who's a redshirt freshman and go, yeah, oh no, that guy's got it. It is no concerns here. 2 thumbs up. That just doesn't really happen. So, I don't think the fact that Ryan Day views that as a little bit of a concern doesn't necessarily make me think it's a concern, because as I think you wrote in this week's What I Wonder, like, college football coaches get paid to be concerned. Like, that is just sort of the natural resting state of a college football coach. So, he's someone who definitely, the ceiling for him has definitely risen quite a bit.
My final riser is freshman tight end Jelani Thurman, who has passed, at least in what we saw in spring, Sam Hart and Bennett Christian. I don't know how many 14 personnel packages Ohio State will play, so who knows how much he will see the field this season. I think we will see him, but when you enter in the spring as a true freshman, and whether or not it's actually happened or it's just what we're seeing and what I'm choosing to see, you pass 2 guys ahead of you on a depth chart, I think technically that makes you a riser, and I'm not sure anybody else has done that. Has anybody else on this on our lists climbed over 2 people ahead of him on the depth chart? Maybe Carson Hinsman, but I don't. Victor Cutler is, and Jacob James is not even really on the list. I think he's maybe done the most climbing. Carnell Tate, of course, his ceiling is Marvin Harrison. So, like, you're not going to get to the top, but I like Jelani Thurman, and he showed it in some of the spring practices that we got to see, some catching and fighting after the catch, and has shown good hands. The size and the potential are elite. So I'm going my final one, Jelani Thurman. Thank you.
Yeah, and he's someone else who lost his black stripe in the spring. He and Carnell Tate and Malik Hartford were the 3 who lost their black stripes this spring. And that's, to do it that early in your career is always, that's put that line on your resume, because that probably means something. And he's someone who, you saw him out there making plays. He already looks like a college-sized tight end. I did not spend a ton of time watching him do blocking drills or any of that kind of stuff. So I don't feel like I have enough information to make a real firm statement on this is someone who is definitely going to be able to play this spring or this fall, because blocking is a big part of that. It feels like in a lot of other areas, he's probably ready to contribute this fall in terms of pass catching, in terms of just being big enough and physically ready to play. So yeah, I think he's a very good one. I had him on my list as well. We'll give an honorable mention also to pretty much the entire Ohio State cornerback unit, because you came into the spring thinking, they've got some guys back. They've got a transfer from Ole Miss, and he looked pretty okay and is a true freshman at Ole Miss. So it feels, and Jair Brown now ready for a second year, and Jordan Hancock finally healthy. It's like a lot of the pieces were there for this to be good, but then it looked real good all spring. And yeah, there was no Emeka Egbuka, and yeah, there was no Julian Fleming, but the rest of that wide receiver room is no slouch, and they looked consistently very good this spring. Denzel Burke, I think, is someone who could have the biggest jump from sophomore season to junior season on this year's team. Jordan Hancock finally has started to look like the Jordan Hancock that you sort of thought they might have when they signed him. He was a top 50 kind of national player. He is, now that he's healthy, he's looking a lot like a cornerback who could be a very, very good, all conference caliber cornerback this year. And Davis Nigbinosin, I mean, he's got length, he's got good coverage ability. He gives them a little bit of a different look there. And Jair Brown was really good. Jair Brown, we saw him working at nickel a little bit this spring. I mean, it just, that cornerback room on the whole, it feels like that might, if you're going to do the class superlatives, I think that cornerback room might get the most improved award.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it's funny because we talk about Travion Henderson having this like J.K. Dobbins like resurgence. We might want to apply that to Denzel Burke as well, where you have this outstanding freshman season. You drop back a little bit as a sophomore and then as a junior, because we've talked about J.K. Dobbins, the serious nature that he had as a junior heading into like this time of year, and then in the winter and in the spring. I think you could say the same thing for Denzel Burke, where you are a better player than what you saw last year and what you showed, and you've got this inner pride to go and make some things right. And I think you've got that. And then the other guys like Jordan Hancock, Davison Igbinosun, like they're trying to get on the field. And Davison Igbinosun was a starter and left Ole Miss to come to Ohio State because he wants to be a first rounder. And Jordan Hancock, like those two guys are going to be battling like crazy, which I still think they play all three. I think those three guys is obviously as long as they show that they can do it. Like if you've got three guys, I think they will play them as opposed to what we've seen, they played everybody last year, but that's because of injuries. But if they're healthy and you've got three, I think we'll see some sort of a rotation. I don't know how much Denzel Burke will rotate in there, but I don't think if you've got three guys that should start, that one of them should just sit and watch.
And you definitely don't think that that's going to be the case. That has historically been something where if they've had three guys they felt were on similar levels, you see the rotation. And I think in these days with the transfer portal, you don't have the, I don't know that you even call it a luxury because it wouldn't necessarily be a good thing to do, but you don't have the luxury of just saying like, well, you're just going to sit, you're going to get 5 snaps this game. You're fine, but we just don't want to, we like the feng shui of the field as it is. Like that's not a thing you do anymore because guys will hit the portal if they're not happy with playing time. So, and there are a bunch of benefits as we discussed earlier in terms of keeping guys fresh. And if you're chasing wide receivers up and down the field and they're swapping out wide receivers all game and you're not swapping out your corners, well, guess what? By the fourth quarter, your corners are going to be more tired than their wide receivers. And that's when bad things happen. So, I think I would fully expect a 3-corner rotation and, maybe Jair Brown is rotating with Cam Martinez at the nickel spot or, with Jahad Carter and Cam Martinez at the nickel spot, however they end up shaking that out. But I expect to see at least 4 corners getting a decent number of snaps this year.
Speaking of the transfer portal, Tom, let's move in. Obviously, Ohio State is going to be looking at the transfer portal. Everybody is. I think the 2 top positions that I would have them looking at is offensive line, specifically tackle and defensive tackle. Really, I think if somebody's out there, I just don't know that there's anybody really out there at offensive tackle. I did see last week, Cortland Ford from USC, who is a former starter, entered the portal. Overall, he's ranked like the number 45 tackle to enter the portal since the winter. So that gives you an idea. Like he's probably the top guy. He might be one of the top guys out there right now that's uncommitted. And if you include him, if you include the winter and the spring transfer portal rankings, he'd be, like I said, 45 overall, just to give you an idea of what Ohio State has to choose from right now. And they're not the only ones that are choosing. And as I think I've said before, it's a post-apocalyptic grocery store right now, and the only thing on the shelves are potted meat and Q-tips. And so, is that better than the Dinty Moore that you already have in the cupboard, Tom? I don't know.
I would definitely prefer to eat the Dinty Moore than the Q-tips. I have never tried potted meat, but I would assume I'm going to go with the Dinty Moore there as well. But this is, I think this is a situation where you got to remember that, the transfer portal opened about a week ago, 6 days ago, as we're talking right now. It's still open for another week. And all guys have to do is put their name in. And there are a bunch of schools that are having spring games this weekend. April 22nd is a busy spring game weekend. So I don't think that the people who are in the portal right now are going to be the end of the people who are in the portal right now. As of the time we're recording this, I believe Jake Seibert is the only one who has left Ohio State. I'm expecting that Jake Seibert will not be the only player to leave Ohio State after spring ball. So if it's not done for the outflow from Ohio State, it's definitely not done for the outflow from a lot of other places. So I think there's a decent possibility that you have at least one more tackle who could help Ohio State enter the portal on offense or defense or both. And then you see how great your NIL program is and how great your development and NFL draft sales pitch is and all that. But I think it's probably, I think you have to kind of grade the post-spring transfer portal as incomplete right now, because I don't necessarily see anyone who jumps out as this guy would be an immediate step up. You're looking for the guy who was first team All MAC at left tackle, or first team All American Athletic Conference at left tackle or defensive tackle last year. When that guy jumps in the portal, that's the kind of guy they're looking for as potentially the guy who could make a improve somewhere on the line.
Yeah, you're looking for that guy. You're looking for Jonah Jackson, and in the spring, you're looking for the guy who has wanted a degree from a place and got it, and now is going to go look for something better, who has played and been established. Because bringing somebody in who has not started or been a starter or been has enough film for you to decide, okay, he can play here. Like there's really that's just bringing somebody in to bring somebody in, and I don't know that that's even helping at all. Especially when you're looking for the right culture fit. But yeah, so I don't like the fact that they changed they pushed everything up 2 weeks, and I think I wonder if that was done because coaches wanted to almost trap their players, the ones that they wanted to keep from leaving. Like you only have, some of these guys are going to have like a day after spring ball to decide, or a week after spring ball to decide, and are they getting all of these exit interviews done so that the coach can tell a guy, well, I don't really see you playing. Now, the ones that they want out, obviously, those guys you're not going to try to keep those guys. You're going to let them know, like, yeah, I just don't see it happening here for you. But the guys that you want and they want to go out, you're like, can we talk tomorrow? And it's like, well, that's actually the day after the portal. No, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. There's just, it doesn't leave a lot of time for players to consider their future. And then you do it now. Like, you have to be considering your future through all of spring, I guess, then. And I'm sure they're probably doing that every single day of their lives in terms of greener grass and things like that. But I'm with you. Let's see how things continue to go over the next 9 days, I guess, 10 days, 9 days. It's until it closes, the 30th, I think.
I think that's right. Yeah, I think that's right.
So there'll still be time. And as I said, it's like, once you start seeing Ohio State throw some offers out, and I don't know that we've actually even seen any offensive line offers from Ohio State yet in this portal run. Defensively, I noticed a defensive tackle, Tawan Malone, out there that came down to Ohio State and Ole Miss and some other schools, but I don't see him getting back into the mix with Ohio State. I have no information on that. It's just he was a baseball guy too, and that's not really, But he's got a pretty decent NIL valuation, Tom.
Yeah, that's and that's the exact amount that he'll get. So the number is very precise. We were talking before the show about FEI and how they have it all down to tenths of a percent. It's like, I think all these numbers might be kind of nonsense. And so anyway, he's. I think the order of likelihood at this point to me is player who is. I guess Ohio State does not add a tackle is number one. Number two is player who is not yet in the portal. It comes to Ohio State is number two. And number three is player who is in the portal comes to Ohio State. I think that's the order I'd have them in, but my degree of confidence on that is not super high.
Yeah, and I would say 1 and 2 are closer than 3.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But, in terms of on the defensive side as well, Georgia defensive tackle Bear Alexander is out there. And that seems to me like, why would a defensive guy leave Georgia? And that's going to cost somebody, basically, in terms of, and not in a bad way. I mean, I think in a monetary way. And I don't know that Ohio State's looking for a starting defensive tackle. I think maybe some depth, but also you've got 3 guys in the freshman class that could potentially be that. So there's just really nowhere else to, like, no other positions where Ohio State would be like, we could use somebody.
Yeah, I think they're all set at running back and wide receiver and quarterback and tight end and linebacker and corner. And I mean, they've already brought in one safety. So yeah, it just doesn't, it feels like they are, they're not the people, you're going to the grocery store and your list is, you're like scrolling on your phone, scrolling your list. This is, okay, we need 2 things. And, hopefully the store has these 2 things because these are the only 2 things we're going to the store for. And that's not a bad place to be because as you said, this is going to be potentially a resource-intensive time in the transfer portal if you're going after guys at positions of significant need for other top programs. So there are only so many guys that can fill those roles, and there's generally a lot of need in those roles. So, Tony, as we know, you got to make the supply and demand curves meet, and sometimes that meets higher up and further to the right than you might expect.
And honestly, looking at it, maybe defensive end more than defensive tackle with the way the classes have been turning out. And if Ohio State loses a couple of guys to the NFL after this year, maybe next year they're looking at the portal if they're not able to secure a rather large number of defensive ends in the 2024 class. And right now, that I don't know that it's looking too promising in terms of a large defensive end class in 2024. But anything else, Tom, before we get out of here?
No, I think we're good. Hope everyone has a wonderful weekend, and don't worry, we'll be back next week. Or worry, we'll be back next week. However, whichever one fits your mood.
Right. Perfectly said, Tom. Want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, you can find us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Become a member. Chat with us there on the message board. Read the inside recruiting info, inside team info, all of that good stuff, and just regular chatting with Buckeye fans and people like Tom. You know what? Scratch that last part. Just interact with the regular Buckeye fans and other people as well. And also find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle for all of our videos. Go ahead and hit the like on this one if you would. If you're watching it, hit the bell to be notified when we go live. And of course, subscribe to our YouTube page. Thank you very much, and we'll talk to you guys later.